Good morning. We are at the Sheboygan County Historical Museum for our third Saturday, June 18th, 2011. Our theme this month is Sheboygan County and the Korean War. We have lots of interesting things in store for you. We have a vehicle that was used in the Korean War that you'll be able to see. We also have a number of veterans who served in the Korean War, which is often referred to as the Forgotten War. We have two veterans who were wounded in the Korean War. One was in the hospital for about a year, and the other one was in ship hospital for about 70 days. We also have we have a medic who was in the war, and he tells of his experience when a lieutenant was killed and he saw him being captured. We also have a number of wonderful pictures of the aftermath of the war when there was rebuilding and things were trying to get back to normal. So we hope that you enjoy the day, and we hope that you enjoy the things that they have to share with you.
I'm Henry Young. I'm on the board of directors of the Sheboygan County Historical Museum. I'm very happy to be part of the third Saturday program recalling my personal experiences in the Korean War. I had graduated from college on June 6th of 1955 and immediately was drafted into the United States Army. 2 days later, I went to basic training in Fort Knox and later to Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri, and was shipped over to Korea along with all my other college classmates. In December of 1955, I served a 2-year term of duty. My official capacity was Troop Information and Educational Officer. I had landed in Incheon after about 18 days on a troop ship. One of the most horrible experiences I remember because everybody got sick multi times. My duty when I went to Korea was to, as I mentioned, Troop Information and Education Officer. I was part of a group in an ordnance group that we were within miles of the 38th parallel. Occasionally you would see spurts of fighting or combat, and it scared the living daylights out of me. I was trained, or tried to be trained, as a fighter, a soldier, which is tough for a person that just couldn't really figure out how to kill anybody. But in any event, it was a duty that I will never forget. I'm a strong believer that everybody at some time in their life should have some stint in the Army or military service, Navy or Air Force, Marines, and it would be good training. I'm happy to say that although traumatic at times, I would be happy to serve my country again, and was glad that I had the opportunity to find out a different part of the world that I have never seen before. As a Christian individual, it was difficult because Christianity in that part of the world, whether it be China, India, any place of the Far East, is only about 1.5% of the population. So there were religions, Hindu, Buddhism, Shintoism, that I had never heard of before. So it truly was an interesting educational experience. I hope you enjoy the program today, as I will sharing some of my stories with the guests that will be arriving in a couple of minutes. Thank you.
My name is David Martini. I brought my vehicle with me today. The vehicle behind me, it's actually a 1942 Dodge 3/4 ton weapons carrier. Even though the truck was built for the Second World War, these were still in use during Korea and a few years after. It's basically a 3/4 ton truck, 4-wheel drive. It's got a winch on the front. This truck, this chassis, is basically the same chassis they used in all the 3/4 ton trucks during the Korean War and World War II. By changing the back, you could have an ambulance, a command car, a troop carrier. This is called a weapons carrier, but that's basically a troop carrier, or as you said, a weapons carrier. You could carry anything on it. You could carry rifles, ammunition, food, etc. Spare tire was mounted on the side here for 2 reasons. One, you didn't want to take up room in the cargo bed. You needed as much room in the cargo bed as possible. And 2, it gave the driver a little bit of protection from small arms fire. Somebody was shooting at me with a rifle, the rifle would not shoot through there. Machine gun or something would, so it would not do no good. There are storage compartments underneath the seats here. We'll go around the back, we'll show you. We can come around the back, we'll show them. Gas tank is right here. It's a 30-gallon gas tank underneath the floor, which is probably not a real good thing in combat, but that's where it was. The canvas can be rolled down for complete protection from the elements, or can be completely taken off. The same with over the front here. There'd be a canvas over the driver. There were no side doors, so in the summer it was extremely hot, winter was extremely cold. If you were someplace where you had a lot of enemy aircraft, you would take the canvas off altogether. That way you could look and see all around you. Come around to the back of the truck here. I'll move the uniform here for a minute. You can see that this truck was actually designed to carry, you could carry 10 men in here with their gear. You could have 4 guys down each side on the seats, and there'd be 2 guys sitting in the front duffel bags or whatever. You'd have a driver and a co-driver. Basically, it's got a towing pinto. You could tow a small howitzer behind it or a cargo trailer. The markings on it are for a World War II unit. They're not Korean War, but they are World War II. This would be the 7th Air Force 18th Fighter Group, which was fighter planes. And if you look here, this truck would have belonged to headquarters company. It was truck 4. So when they did a convoy lineup, this truck knew where it had to go. It went in the headquarters section, it was truck 4. Over here, we have a field desk, and this is basically, could be company level, but any promotions, any kind of paperwork would have been done at this desk. The typewriter, of course, is an older military typewriter. Got the U.S. markings and stuff on the top. When you decide to go, we could take and close everything up. Here we have a field desk, which would be usually by your clerical officer or company clerk, whatever. Anything that would have been done out in the field, any kind of paperwork would have been done at this workstation. You would have had a typewriter, a manual typewriter, Army issue. Okay, if we were to take and transport this thing, we would shut the typewriter up, put it in the case, and it'd be ready to go. Now the field desk, we would end up folding up the legs. This would lift off. The stool here is collapsible. It would actually be mounted in here and strapped in, but I'm not going to strap it in. All the drawers would be shut. We would secure it up with all 4 hasps. Then the unit could be picked up by 2 men by the handles, carried, and thrown in the back of the truck. There's your whole office. Behind it, we have a Korean era footlocker. This was an enlisted man's footlocker, basic simple plywood construction. It's dated 1951, and the company that built it. Basically nothing fancy. You would have your pants and stuff could be rolled up across the bottom. You had your top tray, and there was actually a way this was supposed to be set up. You'd have your undergarments, your shaving kit, your personal stuff, letter writing and stuff. There's actually a chart you had to follow to set this thing up. So you put your tray in, put the lid down, you locked it, ready to go. Brought a couple uniforms along today. This is your standard flyer's jacket, model A2. The Air Force wore these, and so did your Army pilots that flew some of your helicopters or your L4s. Basically, made by Cooper. This is a newer one. It's not an actual World War II one, but it's a reissue. And here's a Korean War era uniform. This would be your Class A's. And of course, you'd have his distinguished unit insignia on here. The U.S., of course, and he was in 519th MP Company. And this would tell you different units you were with. If I was wearing this uniform, you'd see the pink pants. They call it pinks. This is greens. This is referred to an officer's pinks and greens uniform, just the way you see it. For those of you that watched MASH, you've probably seen this combination of uniform already. The enlisted men would have had a whole OD green uniform. It would have been green pants and a short jacket referred to as an Ike jacket. Later on, you'll see one down in the museum. There's an Ike jacket in the museum. But this setup here is what the officers would have wore. Anything you would have had would have been portable and collapsible. Same with the chair here. So everything could basically transport it in the back of the truck and away you went. That's all I have to say.
I'm Nick Dickrell. I'm here at the Sheboygan County Museum this morning, displaying some of the pictures I took while I was in Korea. I served with the United States Marine Corps from 52 to 54. I was actually drafted into the Marine Corps because they were short of Marines. But I was very proud to be part of the U.S. Marine Corps. Some of these pictures I took while we were in Korea. This was a living bunker while we were up on line. We were a forward observer for artillery team. And this was our living bunker. And we would be on line for a month. And then we'd go back to the battery to recuperate. And then another month later, we would go back up on line. This is my friend Ski. He's standing in a trench line that led to the observation post, where we'd look out on enemy territory and pick out targets for artillery. And as we go along here, in some of these pictures, railroad bridge. There's a chow line over there where we would dip our utensil in a boiling bucket of water to sanitize them before we ate and after we ate. Now, as I was serving in the on the line, we sometimes went to an outpost that was ahead of the MLR, the main line of resistance. We called it MLR. And as we were directing fire, I happened to get wounded. Nothing serious. I was evacuated and I was patched up and sent back out on line the next day. And I happened to get a Purple Heart for that, and also a letter of commendation, which I'm very proud of. Thank you very much.
I guess I can introduce myself as Laverne, and they refer to me as Sonny Kraus. My military service began, or thought to have begun, in 1950 as a 19-year-old youth at the quarry talking with our friends, and we decided that rather than being drafted, we decided that we would enlist in a service, and we decided to go into the Navy. In '51, we did enlist and were sent to Great Lakes Naval Training Center, where I attended a Class A hospital corps school, which is part of the Navy Medical Corps, which also provides medical service for the United States Marines. After graduation, I was sent to Camp Lejeune, North Carolina, to the Navy Hospital, and I served there for several months upon requesting a transfer through the 9th Naval District to become a member of the FMF, which is the Fleet Marine Force, which is assigned and attached to the United States Marine Corps. In 1952, I was sent to Camp Pendleton, California for training, and later to Camp Del Mar for field medical training, and was later sent to Korea. I arrived in Korea in August of 1952. From Incheon Harbor, we were transported to a forward position, which later became my home for 5 months. During that time, I was attached to a rifle company and smaller unit called a squad, which consisted of about 15 men. One of the most memorable experiences that I encountered was on December 5th, the night of December 5th, 1952, we were sent or assigned onto a patrol which reconnoitered in the forward position of our lines. We did that regularly. Sometimes we did it when it was so dark that we couldn't see where we were going. We stumbled and fell, and other times we'd go out and it was so bright you would cast shadows. On this particular night that I had this experience, it was a night where we had our first snowfall, and it was very bright. That could cast shadows. We were moving along and we were going to our checkpoints, and we would stop, and in this particular time, the second lieutenant Dunbar came to our squad and rather our fire team and said, well, we heard some noise. We think there might be someone ahead. And we were in a rice paddy with dikes which form a little pond. And he said, everybody stay down. And then the last words I heard were, first fire team up. And 4 fellows with rifles and 1 BAR, Browning automatic weapon, a radio man, and the lieutenant started out. And no sooner had they stepped onto the rice paddy, and there was a wall of machine gun fire coming from in front of us with green tracers, so we know that it was Chinese ammunition. We all stuck to the ground. I tried to crawl into my helmet, which didn't work. And automatically we had 3 fellas hit, and our lieutenant went down. Later, things quieted and they left, and our reinforced patrol came out and brought us back to our main line of resistance. However, Lieutenant Dunbar had been dragged off by the Chinese, and we assumed that he had been taken prisoner. And at that point, I went back to the line with the rest of the fellows, and from there I was transferred to a truck company. My 5-month service had been completed. Then I was in Korea for the remaining portion of my year of service required. I guess it was an experience that you'll never forget, and it brings you closer to whomever you believe in. So thank you.
Barry Leonard. I enlisted in the Marine Corps in March 29th, 1952, along with 3 other men from Cleveland. I was 18 yet at that time. I turned 19 while I was in boot camp. And after my basic training, I went to Camp Pendleton for advanced training. And in November, I shipped out to Korea with what was called the 27th draft at that time. I have a nice little history here. I left the United States on the 19th of November and arrived in Korea on the 5th of December. And exactly a year later, I left Korea on the 19th of November and arrived back in the United States on the 5th of December. So I was on the water the same time in that year. We were supposed to have 2 Thanksgivings going over by crossing the international date line, but they wouldn't do it. So I actually had 3 Thanksgivings in a 12-month period. So anyhow, I arrived in Korea, and I went to the 1st Battalion, Baker Company, 5th Marine Regiment, and I was stationed there with them. I was a BAR man, which is a Browning automatic rifle, which isn't used really much today anymore. It's a 20-pound rifle. It was called the baby machine gun. Nobody liked it because of its weight, but yet whenever anybody went on a patrol, they always wanted to borrow it if you weren't using it, because it was a good weapon. And then on February 21st, I was wounded when we were out on patrol, which we would do. We'd go out at night ahead of the line to see if the enemy was doing any movement out there or whatever. And well, sometimes we surprised them, but that night they surprised us. And I got wounded in mortar round, my right arm and my left leg from the groin down to the ankle. So then I went to the first aid station, and I spent 73 days on the hospital ship recuperating. And then when I was done there, I went back to my outfit again, which in retrospect was kind of foolish, because there was nobody left in my outfit that I knew in my platoon, not a soul. They were either rotated out, wounded, or dead, whichever came first, you might say. But anyhow, I spent the rest of my time, and this was in May, and in June and July, spent some time up on the line again. And then in July 27th, well, then the ceasefire came into effect. And then after that, then we guarded the DMZ, which was another job that was, thank goodness, we never had any problems. Some areas did. But then one thing that has to be pointed out, though, usually, in many cases, when there was a problem, by that I mean an incident, it was done because of boredom. They would preach that to us. You know, people get bored. And what do you do when you get bored? You do stupid things. And they have consequences, you know. But we never had any incidents, so I can't speak from any information. But just for a point of record, in case you know any veterans, in my magazines here in 1968, they started using Agent Orange over in Korea. So if you have a veteran that served in Korea from 1968 to 1971 at the DMZ, he should be sure to apply for compensation, because Agent Orange was used over there
they denied it for years and years, but they finally admitted now that they did use it over there too. So and then I got done out of the service. Well, then I left, and after 3 years I was separated on March 28th and came home and became an electrician and was married for 52 years, and that's, here I am.
I'm Bert Schultz. I was in the Air Force during the Korean War, Air Police, that's military police for the Air Force. I had two brothers in the Second World War, and they came home safe, and then the Third War started, and now this third son has to go. Another war started. I brought some of my stuff here. This is a helmet, GI helmet. It's steel and heavy, and now they've got Kelvar. They're a lot lighter and probably do a better job anyway. This is my duffel bag I had in Korea, and I had a Papasan, one of the Korean guys, paint my name and address on it. A ammunition belt. This is a bazooka rocket, practice rocket from bazookas that were used to kill tanks, although they had to come out bigger ones because the tanks got bigger as time went on. This is a canteen we used for our water. All of our water had to be trucked in because we couldn't drink the water in Korea. This one happens to be made by the Walrath Company in 1943. So it's a hometown canteen. Our mess kit we used to eat with, trenching tool for digging into foxholes and trenches. It can be opened up and made into a shovel, or it can be made into a pick. These are propaganda leaflets that we dropped on the enemy. This one shows a fat cat Chinese sitting on a pile of money where the peasants are pulling in the rice field, they have to pull their own plows. This is Father Taegun. He's the father of all of Korea. And of course, Korea separated, so this was a plea to bring the two countries back together. They shouldn't be fighting each other. This shows a Chinese soldier, and this target for this leaflet was the North Korean soldiers. This was a Chinese soldier, finds a farmer with a ox, he steals the ox to carry his load, and now the farmer has to pull the plow himself. So it's kind of to turn the North Korean soldiers against the Chinese soldiers they were fighting with. The medals that I was awarded in Korea, my dog tags, a Bible my parents sent me, carried with me. It's got a medal that you're supposed to carry in your pocket. It might save your life against shrapnel or something. These are the typical small arms that we used in the Korean War, the same they used in the Second World War. Not any difference. They're only 5 years apart with those wars. So this is the M1 carbine, and this is the M1 Garand. Most of the soldiers, infantry, carried these M1 Garands. They're heavy, and they shot 8 rounds out of a clip like this. The carbine was a lot lighter and used by non-combat troops, but the combat troops like to get a hold of these because they're a lot lighter to carry and a lot of more firepower. They could hold 30 rounds in there, 30 shots. The 45, Colt 45, was used in the First World War, Second World War, and the Korean War, and it was a sidearm for officers and police like I was, and we carried those. This is a K-bar knife, and my brother carried this in the Second World War, and I carried it in Korea. A bayonet fits on the front of the rifle for close-in fighting. So I was a small-town boy, and here I was a long ways from home in Korea after. Oh, yes. It was so cold over there, and we didn't have proper equipment. The war started, it surprised everybody. We weren't properly equipped. And I got this on the black market. I had to go down and buy it on the black market so I'd have something warm to wear. I had a Korean mama-san make me a jacket out of an army blanket that I could wear underneath it. One of my duties I had to do was I had to guard a train from Busan down, from Kunsan down to Daegu to Kunsan. And the reason we had to guard that train against whatever is because it was loaded with winter clothing. Winter clothing had to be guarded because that was so precious over there. When we pushed the Chinese and the North Koreans back, we left a lot of them. We bypassed a lot in the hills and the mountains. So there were a lot of guerrillas out there, and they were hurting for winter clothing too. So anytime they could raid in a small outfit to steal clothing, food, ammunition, they did it. So you weren't safe anywhere.
My name is Don Van Engen. I was drafted in 1952. Went to Fort Knox for 16 weeks of infantry basic. I was supposed to go to Fort Benjamin Harris for finance training, but the war was going wide open, so they sent me to Fort Knox. I took 16 weeks of armored infantry, and then I got shipped to Korea with a weapons company, the 7th Division, 17th Regiment Dog Company. Was a weapons company, machine guns, heavy machine guns. Yeah, 50 caliber. I got wounded at the Battle Fort Pork Chop, and I got shipped to St. Luke's U.S. Army Hospital in Tokyo, and then I was shipped back to the United States. I had some wounds that didn't allow me to be in the Army anymore, so I spent the rest of the time in a hospital before I was discharged. That's basically it.
Hi, my name is Bob Thiel. I was in the Army from 1955 to 1957. I spent most of the time in Korea, and this was after the war. I was a fuel and electric repairman at the 707th Ordnance Battalion, and I got out of service in April of 1957. Some of the pictures that I have taken, I got while I was on on duty as an inspector, and we did a lot of traveling. And the pictures are of our company area, and many of them were taken just out of the windows as we were traveling along.
Okay, Don Clemmy, drafted in April 23rd, 1953, basic training in Aberdeen, Maryland. After basic training, was sent to Atlanta General Depot for 8 weeks of schooling, specializing in welding. After the schooling, we were put on furlough or leave. I don't know how long it was, a couple of weeks. And then I shipped out to San Francisco, California. When we got to San Francisco, some of us had a big surprise. We found out that we were no longer with the Army, we were attached to the Air Force. It's known as, the outfit is known as SCAWAF, Special Category Army with Air Force. We were put on the USS Randall, 8 days, it's a troop ship. happened to meet a sailor on there who was my high school locker mate, right next to me, well, going to high school. Anyway, 8 days later, we were in the harbor in Yokohama, Japan. After some processing, then we were put on a C-124, and we were flown to Korea. We ended up at the big air base near Seoul. From there, we were trucked to a place called Suwon K-13. And after spending about 6 months at K-13, the entire company, we were a small company, less than 100 men, we were put on a train and we were taken south to Kunsan. Kunsan is down here. Here's Suwon. We were in Kunsan for about 4 months. We were put on a LST, a landing ship. The ship went around the bottom of Korea and went through Moji Harbor and back to Yokohama. We were now stationed at a place called Tachikawa. It's a large higher Far East. All the equipment, everything comes out of Tachikawa. We were at FEMCOM Area A. There's also a FEMCOM Area B. Now, the interesting thing, after we were there, we were assigned to an inspection team. It's called TDY, temporary duty. Our first temporary duty took us from Tachikawa all the way across Japan, right over in here somewhere is where we went through the city of Hiroshima. We didn't see any damage. It was about 9 years after the atomic bomb. But we went, the train took us through. We never got off. We just stayed on the train. And we ended up going through a tunnel onto the island of Kyushu. We spent about 10 days in Kyushu. Then they put us on a plane, flew us back to Tachikawa, and spent some time there. Then they put us on a train and took us all the way up to Hokkaido. Here is a strait, supposed to be one of the roughest weather anywhere around. That's the way to explain it. And we were given something to eat in the form of oysters, fried oysters. And I and one of the guys ate all the oysters. The other guys didn't want any oysters. We ate all the oysters. Then the ship pulled out of the harbor and started going across, and I got rid of all the oysters. I don't know about the other guy. He said. So we spent some time up here in Hokkaido, Japan. And then they flew us back to our base in Tachikawa. Spent some time there. I don't remember how much. Then they put us on a plane. There should be a picture of one here somewhere. A C-124, that's a big cargo plane. And we ended up on Guam. And we were on Guam for 2 weeks. And they flew us back to Tachikawa. And we spent some time on the base. Then we went back on the plane and they flew us to Okinawa. And we spent some time in Okinawa. The interesting thing about Guam was there were so many coconuts, sometimes you had trouble walking without stepping on one. And the weather, it would be bright and sunny. You could, in the evening, go to a movie, and during the movie it would rain like heck. So Guam really wasn't a nice place to be. Okay, that's pretty much what took place. And then when our tour of duty was over, then we flew from Tokyo to Midway, and I had some pictures of some Goonie birds. And then from Midway to Hawaii. And Hawaii, we had to get off the plane because officers got ahead of us. And so we were in Hawaii about 3 days. And then they flew us to Oakland. And we spent a couple of days in Oakland. And they flew us home to Chicago. And the interesting thing is, from Chicago, I got home to Sheboygan by train. So kind of an interesting situation, because I was attached to the Air Force and I had all this temporary duty that sent me all over the Far East, which I never could afford on my own. And in a way, I was kind of sad that I didn't go with some of the other guys to Germany, because I have a German background. But it really was a nice thing to be able to see all these islands and all these parts of the Far East. And there were many other interesting things. I got to see Mount Fujiyama. We walked through the top. The last part, I hung on to the tail of a horse and helped me drag me up, because when you get to that altitude, you get pretty weak. So I got to see Mount Fujiyama, and I know it was on August 1st because that's my sister's birthday.
I'm Darrell Mack. I was aboard the USS Tarawa from 1951 to 1955. We took cruises once to the Med, once to Iceland, and 3 times to the Med, and once around the world. This is my aircraft carrier. This is it. There I am with a plaque. I made it Kohler. But we had a lot of fun on board ship. I was in charge of the bombs, rockets, and torpedoes. Some we had down there. This is the bow of the ship, and the first picture that you saw down there was when we were out 4 days. We were still taking water over the bow. My most memorable experience was on board ship was we lined up next to the Marines, and for inspection we had everybody out there. So the Marines had to move down 30 feet. So they said, Marines, put down, to the right, face front, and all the rest of this garbage. They got all lined up. Lieutenant Commander Miller says, you see where they lined up? Walk down there and line up next to them. We couldn't march anywhere close to Marines. These are all little things for the Tarawa magazine. This is on there. This is from Australia. This is my round the world cruise. It's my shellback certificate. That was made at Kohler Company. They made about 30, 40 of them. This is a flag that I made in there for marching in Sydney and Australia and Wellington for the Battle of Coral Sea. This is what we donated for our ship to the Army, Navy of New Zealand, and this is the actual part of the flight deck that we had. We have reunions every year. As you can see, I haven't been to every one yet because they got them down to about here down there. But we have one every year, which is showed in the book. We just got done in Washington, D.C., which we had a great time. But just last year alone, we lost 49 members. In 1 year is quite a loss. But we still have about 100 that actually go to the meetings. and we're going to have another one next year in Nashville, Tennessee. And I just met a fellow that saw my license plate, and he said, I've got to see this guy, and I signed him up to be a Tarawa member. So it's quite a day down there. I'm welcome to be here and proud to be part of this group.
My name is John Pozowitz. I served in the 7th Infantry Division in Tangdu Shan between June of 1957 to July of 1958. And one of the interesting things that I've done since then was to go on Google Earth and try to find some of the places where I roamed and where I was stationed, and very easily found our camp. This is the valley of Camp Casey, and that's just a little bit east of Tangdu Shan. And I looked down, the hill I walked up to take this picture had a little clearing on top, and there was a little shack there which was a radio site for some other Signal Corps communications. And I was able to find that hill and still see that little clearing in the woods up on top of that hill. When you get to the valley, there's a stream running from here and running from here, and it comes together at a point. And right in this area, we had our trucks lined up in our motor pool, and you can see the trucks in this picture. And when I went to Google Earth, I could find that spot, and they still had Army trucks lined up. Guys were still tending their stations there. But this is another place I stationed on a mountaintop from the middle of December to January with radio communications for a live ammunition firing range called Nightmare Range. And I couldn't find that. There's just too many mountains and there's no outstanding features in that area, but spent a little time over there. This is the train that took me from Seoul to Tangdu Shan. Had 6 rides behind that engine. That's a relic of World War I. And that was still running on that line. And Sigmund Rhee gave that engine to the Railroad Museum in Green Bay, and you can still see it there. And it was kind of like meeting an old friend.
Welcome to the Collection Corner at this month's 3rd Saturday. For this month, we're actually focusing on storage of uniforms, and you can think of those as military uniforms, but there's lots of other kinds of uniforms that really all these rules would apply to as well. A lot of times we recommend that historic textiles be stored in some kind of acid-free box. You can see here that we have a uniform, and we actually have underneath the jacket, there is the tie, the belt, the pants. And what you're looking for when you're boxing up any kind of historic clothing item is to make sure that it fits comfortably and that there's no real hard creases going on within it. So for this uniform, what we've done is we've actually padded out the arms some up into the shoulder area so that there's not any creases where that fabric would get damaged. The thing about uniforms, though, is that they've often been so well made that it's really easy to actually hang them. And what we recommend is using a padded hanger. Here you can see we've taken this jacket and actually put it onto a padded hanger, almost an identical jacket to what we have here. And this item, actually, the hanger pads out well past the shoulder seam. This is the most likely place for you to find damage on any sort of top or textile kind of item that would be hanging. Anything that is sturdy and doesn't have damage in these areas already, particularly the neck and the shoulder area, is going to be a good candidate for doing some type of hanging. And making your own padded hanger is actually really simple. We've already done a couple here, but what we've done, we've taken an older wooden hanger, and you want to look for something that's unfinished, has had a while, has a nice neck on the metal part of the hanging mechanism. We've wrapped it in a polyester batting, which is just cut into strips. And then what we've done is we've taken muslin and we've sewn several sleeves. It's really easy. It's just 2 pieces sewn together, got a little hole here in the top that actually fits down over our hanger. And as soon as I can manage to do this with my gloves on, slide it over, and you're set to go. Now, when you're making a padded hanger, you're making sure that you have adequate padding for however heavy the item is, and that it extends far enough out that it will easily go past that shoulder seam and then into the arm area of what you're hanging. Additionally, especially with uniforms, we encourage people to carefully document the items that are involved. So things like patches, what do they stand for? Items that are maybe removable, like military service pins. Those often are found on the face of the coat. It actually is often best to remove them for storage and store them adjacent to the items, but to document how they were lined up and where they were so that the information is preserved. Additionally, that's the other really important key with preserving historic uniforms. A uniform is just the artifact. It's not the story that goes along with the person that wore it. So when preserving something like this, be sure to get all the information about the individual service, when they were involved, what they were involved in, and any related information that you can document. Ideally, type that up on a piece of acid-free paper and keep it within some sort of envelope or item that is kept with the uniform so that it can be documented. We have a lot more information on caring for historic uniforms and really any of your items that are collectibles that you want to preserve for future generations here at the museum. Feel free to give us a call or stop by during the third Saturday and visit us here in our area where we're doing preservation of your collectibles. Thanks.